Hello, my name is Hugo. Today let's talk about mirrorless Canon EOS R. I've been using mirrorless cameras since Sony a7S. Sony actually pushed me to switch from legendary Canon 5D Mark II because they were so much better. So much better that I was willing to give up all my Canon glass. Eventually I changed my old Sony a7S to Sony a6500 simply because it had an amazing autofocus that actually could be used in shooting video. And after I had Sony a7 III. So what made me switch back to Canon, since I already had lots of Sony glass? Don't get me wrong, Sony a7 III is an amazing camera. So why? I've been using Sony cameras for years. Besides mirrorless cameras I've mentioned earlier, I used to own Sony FS700, Sony FS5, Sony FS7. I didn't own, but I used a lot Sony f55. So for years using those cameras I knew exactly how to get 100% out of those cameras. I'm very well aware how the sensor performs, how to expose, how to color correct it, and etc. And when it gets to colors, that's where Sony is not as good as Canon. And colors to me is everything. Of course you can get beautiful images from Sony, and I have done this for years. But I also had to do a lot of post work to get colors I wanted. When I switched from Sony FS7 to Canon C200, my coloring workflow has so much simplified. Canon gives you a whole lot more accurate and pleasant colors, and skin tones are just great. So, Canon EOS R. Technically on the paper it's not impressive at all. It records 4K up to 30 frames per second, and records 1080 up to 60 frames per second, and it records 120 frames per second in ridiculous 720, which I even didn't bother to use. But the reason why Canon is better than Sony is simply just the look. It just looks a lot more pleasant to eye. The compression a lot less than on Sony, records up to 480 megabits per second, which is a lot. Compared to Sony can do only up to 100 megabits per second. It's a huge difference. The higher bitrate helps to preserve more details and color information. I like the build quality of this camera, the way it feels in hands. I like the flip out screen, which is a lot more convenient than the Sony has. And it's a touch screen that helps you to navigate through the menu a lot easier, and it's intuitive. The battery life is a lot longer. I also like the sensor protection. The thing is that in mirrorless cameras, the sensor usually get dirty because there is no mirror between them, and when you switch lenses, the sensor gets dusty. And when you take off a lens on a Canon, it has the protection on it, which I think is pretty awesome. For those projects when you don't need to shoot 4K and clients request only 1080, when you record 1080 on Sony it looks horrible. I don't know why they did so. But on Canon it looks a lot better. I like that Canon is not limited by choosing ISO when you shoot in log, and on Sony you cannot go any lower than 800, even though I know that it's the best setting for the highest dynamic range. But still, sometimes you just want to go lower and get less noise. Exposing on Canon is a lot easier, it's pretty much straightforward. You don't have to underexpose or overexpose the image. Just shoot it the way it looks on camera and that's it. Where on Sony you have to understand how to overexpose the image in order to get less noise. Sony's S-Log is very good flat profile and preserves a lot of details, but if you don't know how to expose it properly, it can be a nightmare. As for downsides, when you shoot 4K, Canon crops the image widely, where on Sony it doesn't have any crop. When I did test shots, in order to get the same framing I had to use 24mm on Canon and 65mm on Sony. That's how big the crop is. Yes, of course you can get wider lenses, but still, it's an inconvenience. Dynamic range on Sony is a lot better than Canon. Sony claims about 14 stops of dynamic range, where Canon claims about 12, but Canon has a better highlight roll-off. It's even hard to say what is more important. Both cameras have an amazing autofocus, but I prefer more the way it works on Canon. It just feels like someone's pulling the focus, and it works actually a lot better in the low light. Both cameras can record 810-bit in camera. However, Canon has an option to record 10-bit externally. 10-bit has a lot more depth and colors. It's obviously noticeable when you compare those images side to side. 10-bit looks a lot contrastier, but it's not just a contrast that you can increase on 8-bit, it's an actual color depth. The colors are a lot deeper, and you have more ability to push them further. When you use EOS R as a B-cam for Canon C200, 10-bit helps to match the colors a lot better. In conclusions, if you already have Sony a7 III, it's very hard to say if it's worth to change it, simply because it's still a great camera and it has some advantages over Canon. Having Canon C200 actually pushed me to get Canon EOS R, simply because you can have less headache color matching them. There is no doubt that Sony can produce an amazing images, it just requires a little bit more knowledge and skill how to work with the footage. I'm gonna post sequences of the footage that I tested and you can decide yourself if it's worth it or not. Thanks for watching, hit like if you liked this video or dislike if you didn't, click on subscribe button if you wanna watch more videos like this. Bye.